When you realize what your future can be, you want to do it right. UCF Online offers more than 100 fully online programs, plus personalized support from success coaches, so you can get to the future that's right for you.
From the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning
and the University of Louisville's Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning,
I'm Tom Cavanaugh.
And I am Kelvin Thompson.
And you are listening to Topcast, the teaching online podcast.
Final 15 scheduled episodes of that podcast. Yeah, that's the thing.
That's right. That's right. So, happy new school year as we are recording this. Public schools and universities are kicking off all around North America.
Labor Day behind us, at least in the U.S. and Canada, anyway. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. So, Kelvin, I have a thematically selected coffee today, and I'm wondering if you have a thematically selected coffee today.
Tom, I always have a thematically selected coffee, whether anybody recognizes it or not. I think I do. Well, I'm very curious. What's in your cup?
Yeah, sometimes your coffee's stronger than your thematic connection.
It's so true.
But all right, so today I'm drinking the Green Mountain Half Calf, which I've had before. And it is two things in one.
2 in 1.
Yeah.
I see what you're going for.
Yeah, all right. So we'll wait. You do yours.
I am drinking, Tom, a double shot espresso from the cafe at the Speed Art Museum next door using Golden Hour coffee from 8th and Roast Coffee in cooperation with Good Citizen Coffee, both of which are in Nashville, Tennessee. I think my connection's more nuanced than yours, but let's do yours. I think 2 in 1. 2 in 1 is what you're going for.
2 in 1 is what I'm going for. Yeah, absolutely. And I see you had a double shot of espresso.
Yeah, that was purely accidental.
Okay.
But go ahead. I know the connection you're going to make. Go ahead.
Well, we have two guests joining us today.
That's right.
Two old friends. Yeah.
Right. I was going with, I don't normally drink espresso, hard stop, period, and I don't normally drink espresso on the show, so it's a little different, but I don't have to tell you, espresso is a foundational staple for so very many coffee drinks. So I thought the different and yet staple was good.
All right, I get it. Yours was a little more nuanced than mine.
Yeah,
so you want to kind of go into sort of the setup of what we're doing here, because it's a little bit different.
It's a little bit different. As we hinted during our previous episode, that would be episode number 192 with our guest, Dr. Brian Alexander, a part of our sprint to the finish line as we get closer to the Topcast finale of episode number 200 is a three-part miniseries. Today's episode is the first of 3 top of the month episodes that will feature a mini panel of notable community members speaking with us about key topics that are, shall we say, structural pillars in our online and digital education work. We're calling this our Pillar Panel mini-series. And, if you missed that episode with Brian Alexander, it may serve as a good entree into this mini-series. So I'd recommend you pause here, go listen to that, then come back here. We'll wait for you. It'll be okay. Today's Pillar Panel topic is leadership vision in online and or digital teaching and learning.
Yeah, that's right. And there's nothing we like more than a good alliteration in the labeling of something. So as we have alluded, we have 2 guests with us today live to talk with us and to discuss this topic of leadership vision in online digital teaching and learning. Old friends, Ray Schroeder and Melissa Vito. And I'll do a little bit of an intro to set it up on Ray, and then you can talk about Melissa. Ray Schroeder is a nationally respected and connected leader in higher education online learning. Many listeners will know Ray from his steady stream of insights via blogs and columns spanning decades, including Inside Higher Ed and other places. He is currently a senior fellow at UPCEA and Professor Emeritus at the University of Illinois Springfield. Having joined the faculty of UIS in 1977, Ray launched the online programs of UIS and Associate Vice Chancellor for Online Learning in 2021. Ray's accolades are too many to list. We'd be here for the whole episode, but we should note the eponymous Ray Schroeder Leadership Award for the Advancement of Digital Learning, given periodically by UPSEA. And I was there for both of those awards, and very deserving winners. Within the past few years also, Ray has become a national voice in the practical application of AI. Welcome, Ray.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, and it's great to join both you and Kelvin, and especially to see Melissa on this program as well. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'll take just a second to mention that I filled this rather large mug with Colonel Dickinson's dark blend. That's from Pete's Coffee, and it fuels me through the day.
Awesome.
There you go. I appreciate a guest who brings a beverage. No pressure, Melissa, but let me say nice things about you anyway. Oh, you want to go ahead? You want to say something about a beverage before you? Oh, hey, that's all right. It's okay.
I regardless of what you say about me or anyone who knows me, I did bring my own beverage.
Wow, man.
And if anyone happened to have visited me in my office at the University of Arizona, one would have seen my Andy Warhol custom print made of sugar-free Red Bull cans. I don't drink coffee. So
you
held up 2 cans of Red Bull.
I did. 80 milligrams.
Is that just for this show?
Yeah, but your coffee's got probably more caffeine. Yeah. I have a couple little Red Bull refrigerators downstairs, and it's both my drink and it's a metaphor for how I approach leadership, how I approach life.
Awesome.
So, buckle up. It's going to be a ride here. Let me just tell you. So, if you didn't already figure it out, that was Dr. Melissa Vito, who is a recognized higher education leader with over 35 years of experience in public higher education. She is currently the Vice Provost for Academic Innovation at the University of Texas at San Antonio, where UTSA's online programs are in her portfolio. Melissa previously retired from the University of Arizona in 2018 as Senior Vice Provost for Academic Initiatives and Student Success and Senior Vice President for Enrollment and Student Affairs. Probably drank 4 Red Bulls back then. She launched the University of Arizona's online programs in 2015.
Yeah.
Dr. Vito is active in many professional associations and currently serves on the board of directors for the Online Learning Consortium. And we should note that both of our guests are prolific as writers and speakers and in service in numerous ways to our broader higher education community. We'll put links to biographic stuff and things you've done and all that. We'll put it in the show notes. You should all go to the show notes page and just ponder how amazing it is to have colleagues with us like Melissa and Ray. Welcome.
Yeah. So thank you to both of you for agreeing to be on Topcast. I think getting your perspectives as we kind of, turn the page towards the future of online learning and teaching. You two have a lot of wisdom to offer.
Shall we jump into the pillar panel topics? So in these special farewell episodes, we're going to address 3 topics core to successful online and digital education: leadership vision, faculty professional development, and research and evidence-driven practice. So the first question is, how do you all see these topics as interrelated? That is, in what ways are these 3 topics all pillars for our work of strategic online digital education? Maybe we'll start with Ray and then Melissa, and then we have any time, Tom or I can chime in as well. Ray?
Well, that's a great question. There are many ways to come at this. I would say one of the things that I did at UIS. Golly, it's always 20 years ago, but quite a few years ago, was with the help of my provost, Terry Berman, at the time, to create the Center for Online Learning, Research, and Service. And so in one unit, we combined grant getting, supporting faculty in obtaining financial support for their research. And of course, we supported in the learning, we supported the online program with instructional designers and the like. And then in the service, we had a number of outlets, but one was MOOCs and providing free programming to a larger distant audience that could be worldwide. So the concept was we covered the three-part mission for faculty members. And in doing so, in this case, we became an important unit recognized instantly by the faculty as one that supported them, that was helping them to deliver the highest quality learning to the students. And so I think while we were student-centric, really the faculty, we needed faculty engagement. And this helped. I would say also that leadership is broadly a team sport. I approach it not as an individual being the leader. It's really the team. And so I freely dispersed opportunities to take leadership, but also to make critical comments and to take apart what we had done.
Thanks, Ray. Melissa?
Hey, so, hey, Calvin, remind me the question. I want to make sure that I get this.
Yeah.
I know these are the three pillars. Am I threading these three things together, or just?
Yeah. So, how do you see them as interrelated? So, how do they all three function as pillars?
Let me talk a little bit about me because I'm sitting here, and in doing that, it's going to illustrate also how I see the interconnectedness of these things. So I'm sort of the accidental online person leader. My career started in student affairs, brought in enrollment, retention, all of our auxiliaries, that were student facing and they were self-operated. And then in around 2000, probably 17-ish or so, 18, 19, somewhere around there, I'm I think a fairly new VP, and I'm having a dinner for career service employers, the ones who hire most of our students. So we want to make them feel extra good. And we're at dinner, and I'm asking them. I said, "What are your pain points?" And we're thanking them. They said, "We can't hire your students if we have longer internships because you don't really have any online way that students can continue their enrollment through a semester." And so I was like, "That's ridiculous. We need to fix this." And about, I don't know, a couple of weeks later, I'm sitting in a cabinet meeting with the president who makes an offhand comment. And people who know me know that whenever someone says something that sort of reflects a prevailing perception, I automatically resist it. And so she said, students they're taking their weekends earlier and earlier because you walk through campus on Thursday and there is like nobody here. Used to just be Friday, but clearly they're partying more starting on Wednesday. So I'm like, maybe, but I bet you, because I had kids in college also, this around that time, a little bit later maybe, this might have been 2010 or 11. And I said, it's possible, but I bet maybe they're taking more online classes. Because I was also seeing our bookstores revenues soften a little bit, and I was seeing our student union revenues soften a little bit. And so I'm like, something is going on here. So I had our registrar. Fortunately, she reported to me, so it wasn't hard. Do a study of what students were doing, what their modalities were. And we found that 2/3 of all students had at least 2 online classes every year. and some 4 or 5. And so it completely blew out the way people were thinking about things. And it set me on a track to look at what we wanted to do. So in terms of leadership, whatever, it's that always looking around and trying to connect the dots that's really important. Subject matter expertise is important, and that can be learned. But leadership style, a leadership approach is transcendent to topics. So the faculty piece, fundamental to this. The first thing I wanted to do was have our online program lift up the entire institution. Fortuitously, I had the opportunity to hire someone to help lead it, and I went to our faculty instead of looking for somebody who knew online, and brought in someone who was awesome, shocked that we had a meeting, did a great job as a provost now at another institution, and that symbolized my authentic feeling that whatever we do has to be faculty focused, and then has to be about an extraordinary type of an online experience for our students. And all of my student affairs background sort of fed into that. So I think there's nothing that doesn't connect all of these, and none of this matters if we aren't figuring out what's working. So Tom's heard me talk about one of the first things I did at UTSA is see if I could hire my own IR person, part of the bigger team, so we could measure stuff. But at Arizona, when we were doing this, we set up also an enrollment online, a whole way around kind of IR group that worked with the central team, but started early as we were building, measuring. So these 3 things, not one can work without the other 2, I guess is what I would say. And I feel like I embody some of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Tom, before we go to the next question, anything you want to chime in on this question about interrelationship?
Maybe just one comment is that the kind of research and evidence-driven practice is, I think, the bottom-up companion to the sort of the top-down kind of leadership competencies that Melissa and Ray are talking about, because you want to lead from an informed position and have the data guide some of those decisions, and of course it can also inform the faculty, the kinds of faculty professional development that you provide. So I think it's like you like to say a lot, Kelvin, sort of a push-pull in many ways.
Yeah, I agree with that. I worry a little bit about neat and tidy models, right? When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about so much of the where the rubber hits the road is with the faculty, and preparation for faculty to successfully design and teach online is so imperative, and it's fed by our best insights into how to do things well and what the current needs are. So that's the evidence-driven piece. And it should be in alignment with the leadership vision. Like, what are we all here trying to do? Right. So it should bridge. I worry a little bit about neat and tidy, things, but I do think it fills in the gap. I mean, would Melissa or Ray, you all want to take issue with anything anybody else has said?
Well, I want to jump in to say that I would not, and I know you are not, discounting innovation, which over time builds a research foundation. But trying to, as I'm jumping out with AI, agentic models, as they're released within a week after that, not much research at this point. However, that's 10%. Maybe of what we do, maybe a little bit less, but innovation is also part of the formula.
Ray, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, I really couldn't. And even as we think about research and assessment of what we're doing, we've got to look for unexpected places and not always be trying to tell the same story, in part because that story doesn't always resonate. It feels a little bit shop-worn. And so we try to find other ways to tell the story. We're doing some work around assessment of using generative AI embedded in your courses, in your curriculum. And, we've had a faculty group for a while, got some preliminary stuff back. It's just suggestive, but it gives us a sense of where we want to go. And so I think that research assessment is critically important, and I take pride in knowing that what we do matters because we've got the data to show it. But we also need the other pieces that aren't always talked about, like faculty feel better. We just participated in an SEP project, and we're doing that again, and it's with some other schools. But what are the unexpected pieces of it? The focus is on student success. Watching the faculty who participate in it, it's life-changing for them because they're understanding, wow, if I actually share my humanity with a student and tell them I'm having a bad day or my dog died or whatever it is, I develop a better connection and that student feels like they belong. And so that's not necessarily what we started out to do, but we got to keep our eyes open to what it is. And I think, Ray, your point about innovation and AI right now, it's also about keeping our eyes open to see to see how we keep going and figure out where there are going to be the things that are really enduringly transformative and those things that were at this moment. And so, yeah, my thoughts. I'll shut up.
Only
Sorry.
briefly, I want to say, Melissa, I also agree with that relationship with the faculty. And I had an easy roller coaster a little bit, but easy chair ride through leadership in this field because I was from the faculty, because I was tenured, because I was on the leadership of the faculty senate and president of the faculty union briefly. So those pieces really make it a lot easier. And I think that's important for those who are entering this field to consider that having that level of communication and trust from the faculty is really important.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Tom, that's maybe a good starting point. You want to take us into a little bit of a deeper dive?
So yeah, that does lead to our next question. Kelvin or somebody mentioned the idea, the term leadership vision, and I think that we'd really love to get your perspectives on what you've experienced as far as like different approaches of leadership in this space that have worked, or things that you have seen others do that maybe is not your style, but maybe works. And I'll even throw a little curveball in there, which is that maybe what are some things you've seen that maybe just don't work? But let's first focus on the positive, right? Like what do you think you've done that has been effective in your career as far as leadership in this space, or what have you observed from others that you think has been particularly effective? And then maybe we can circle back around to like, here, don't do this because I watched it blow up right in front of me. So maybe Melissa, we could start with you on this one.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone. There's I'll try not to talk this one through too long because it's we could go hours on it. But actually, I think one of the most fundamental aspects of a leadership vision, developing a vision, and also leading others is curiosity. And so, just flat out number one. And because that leads you to, in higher ed, do the listening tours, go into a new role and meet with people and understand stuff. But a really solid, effective, visionary leader embeds that pretty much in everything they do. So it's not a performative act, but it is part of how you approach what you do. And so I would say, as I think about successful and unsuccessful leaders, I've seen both. I've been asked about someone that I reported to for a while, and people were like, wow, what was that person like? And I said, great, but the least curious person I've ever reported to. And what happens when you're a leader, because you can't see everything anyways. So if you're not curious, you really don't see blind spots. You don't see the big boulder that you're driving up to. You don't see what you're going to back into. And it's hard to build an effective vision. So I don't want to overstate that. but I have seen that, and without sounding like Law and Order and changing people's names, I've seen I've never seen a really effective leader who lacked curiosity. But I've seen a lot of mediocre leaders who lack curiosity. And then I've seen flat out terrible leaders who totally don't have it. So I think that's important. And to me, as sort of a fundamental piece of it. And then it drives, people look for a vision. People seek certainty, particularly in any kind of environment, particularly in leadership changes, or you're interviewing people, or a disruptive era, or budget cuts, or whatever is happening. And so I'm always interested when people are looking at a new leader or interviewing. The first question is, what's their vision? What's your vision going to be? And the really best thing you can do in a new setting is kind of describe how you approach things, what your core values are. So how people will know you to be, that it's important to be optimistic. It's important to be entrepreneurial. It's important to realize that we work with a team. And so we want all of us to feel that you listen to others. But it's generally not realistic to expect a fully built out vision from that first moment. I think the vision is where you see 10 or 20 years from now, and you have the first ones. I think about when I took over online, again, not knowing a lot, I knew that I wanted our practices to lift up the whole institution, to have faster response times, to make sure our faculty were engaged, higher quality programs, those kinds of things. But I didn't have it all figured out. But people knew that generally that was where we were going. And I think faculty are, well, my career hasn't been with faculty. I've started a couple of programs that have been pretty powerful, faculty-student interaction programs, faculty fellow programs. I've had really strong relationships with faculty governance forever. Faculty want respect and want to know that they have we're all part of a community. But I think the most damaging thing that a leader can do is demonstrate to a faculty member that they're not listening. Back to curiosity. And
that's great.
So I don't know. Those are just my rambling thoughts. And again, I may have completely shot off the wrong question, but those are the things I'm thinking about.
Not at all. I think that's a great answer. Curiosity. I'm going to remember that. I like to think I do it, but I never really thought about it, articulated it before. So Ray, same question for you. What have you seen work over the years? What's worked for you? What has worked for others?
Well, again, I must say that Melissa and I have a shared vision, to use that word a little differently. And I would say empathy. So I would add that to the to curiosity. So I think those are two qualities that don't often come right to the top of our mind. But I think empathy for the students, empathy for your staff, for those whom you lead, and others. I mean, but it starts kind of at home. I always respected and continue to respect my team. Just a brief anecdote. So those years ago when I moved up to the provost's office, I had the good fortune to hire a longer time friend of mine, Dr. Vicki Cook. Some of you may know Vicki. And Vicki,
friend of the program. She's been on.
The
there
best.
you go. And she's one who moves the ball. So she really helped develop the unit from where I left it. She added certificates and then became the director of admissions and the associate chancellor, and on, moved up. And so she was replaced by another person that we had on our original team, Michelle Grivens, who within a year moved on to director of institutional research. So she was kind of our data, oriented person. And just as Melissa used an IR hire to advance the university. So Michelle moved on, and just now Emily Bowles, instructional designer, superb, has leadership abilities as well. So we had a whole string, even though we did national searches, even though we really did exhaustive work in replacing those positions. So I think that's part of it. Another part is, I would say that, and I wonder if this is the case on your campuses, but certainly on ours, and I bet on yours, those in instructional design development are very popular among the faculty. Those people who go to the faculty's offices and help work with them, work them through the challenges of designing and developing. And in recognition, in a sense of that, I used to put in a half day a week that they could. I asked them to submit the project to me, and so we could talk about it. But a project, so they would have 10%, assuming they only worked, 5 full days, which commonly is not the case. But they would have that time to work on a project that advanced our unit, or advanced the university more broadly. And I think that's part of leadership, is giving the direct reports more opportunity to take control of what they're doing. I mean, we all have, as leaders, we all need to bring in more revenue, right? Probably more students is the way to bring in more revenue. So that's the end zone. We'll take a football for a moment. But how we get there are many ways to get there. And it's that team. I really go back to the team, Tom. I say, so much of the ways that we built a unit, and I started back on this project as director of the unit Office of Technology Enhanced Learning, but basically it was to get faculty on the internet and using it both ways. And we, that I really turned to the team. It was the team who helped us construct that unit and brought, through their diversity, brought vision to what we were doing.
It's interesting. Just a quick observation, Kelvin, and I'll give you an opportunity to weigh in, that, what you both sort of said, be curious, have empathy. Ray, you touched on succession planning a little bit. Those skills, those orientations transcend online learning. Those are just good leadership, attributes and practices. And I think that's really interesting, that the Colo guidebook that you all contributed to, that we just put out this summer, touches on that as well. That good leadership isn't, you should know what LMS stands for, right? But you should, more importantly though, is sort of the big broad leadership competencies, which I think it's very interesting. Unprompted, you both kind of brought things like that up. So Kelvin, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this little part of the conversation went a different direction than I expected it to go, right? Because I'm prepared to ask a question in a minute that I think we were already answering, right? Which has to do with more timeless principles and practices that transcend sort of the specific online or digital field. So in that spirit, chiming on to that, I think I would sort of echo and resonate with what's already been said of the human element, like having a human-oriented, human-first, humane approach to leadership. People matter. Culture matters. You can't do anything with culture if you don't do anything with people. You're not going to do anything strategically valuable if you don't address culture and the people part. You treat people right, then things eventually work out. You can't go wrong I think, if we're going to go with that spirit of that more timeless thing. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything that's been said. And maybe another way of saying it is like we've talked about this concept of futures literacy and being able to imagine a future state that's maybe not completely dependent upon what has come before. Don't be limited by the frame of reference of history. Do some blue sky thinking, and it's very hard to do actually, to really divorce yourself from the current constraints and limitations that you have to just sort of imagine a future state. But if you can develop that skill, and even more importantly, develop it in your team as a culture of thinking like that, I think, to Ray's point, you're gonna have more innovation.
Well,
Yeah, Melissa.
can I jump in for a second? I think when you were talking, Kelvin, and actually Tom just now, I wanted to just make a comment. I talk in other settings and do sometimes some training work with EDUCAUSE, with digital learning leaders networks, and and other types of things. And what I always say to those of us working in this field is to actually think bigger around leadership. So, for the instructional designer who's like thinking, how do I get to that next step? The skills you develop can take you beyond the area you're in right now. We brought teaching, learning, digital learning into one unit, teaching, learning, digital transformation, sort of a agnostic to modalities, but driven by values and kind of where we want to go. But I want the team members with whom I work here, I want them to see themselves as, well, I could be provost if I want to. I could do, I want an aspirational approach. And that doesn't always, sometimes you build on it, but it's also developing sort of a mindset around how you think about what your work is. And it's important to have skill and subject matter expertise. And that's what builds credibility with faculty and extraordinary coursework and leads to good outcomes. And yet, much of what you're doing personally can actually be have a broader application. And then you can also impact online learning in bigger ways, sometimes from a different seat. So as just a footnote to this conversation, I just wanted to kind of toss that out.
Yeah, that's great. Kelvin, since I think you're right, we may have kind of already touched on our next planned question. Should we kind of just jump ahead?
We certainly can, although I was thinking about calling a slight audible and kind of taking a little bit of a jumping off point from something you said, Tom, about like futures literacy. Just to extend this conversation a little bit, thinking about, and somebody mentioned this earlier in the conversation about like when there's a lot going on, like when there's all kind of stressors, when there's change afoot, against the swirl of ongoing flux in higher education, including but not limited to forces like artificial intelligence, Ray, or other technology disruptors, as well as evolving policy landscapes. Against that kind of a background, what do we see as like North Star kinds of something to hold on to head toward a desirable possible future? How do we, as leaders, from a leadership vision perspective, in what we today call online or digital education, but who knows what it'll be called eventually, is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should put on the page? So maybe Ray, then maybe over to Melissa, maybe just briefly. I mean, we may have already addressed it, like Tom was just saying, right?
Yeah, I think as we look overall at learning, my North Star always was and remains taking the university to the student, not requiring the student to come to the university, because that's the biggest impediment to accessible learning. So I think that's really important. And I think that continues. And even as we do talk about AI, that's almost inherently in most of our applications will be an online delivered technology. It's not going to be, oh, come on in here, and then you can use AI. No, it's going to be use AI from your home in these various ways, or work, or whatever. I think that one of my deep concerns yet, and as long as I have my wits about me and energy, I want to try to fight this battle. And it is, I always had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach when I turned in a C, a D, or an F for a student. Not necessarily a B, but it really bothered me because I failed. I told junior faculty, you failed. You know, if you're flunking out students, if you're a gatekeeper, you failed, not the students, because so many failed. So I look at that and I say, what about adaptive learning that in fact reaches mastery learning? And I think we've heard of that term. I'll speak 15 seconds on it. The concept is that you regularly assess students through through the learning objectives, not necessarily through 15 weeks, because it may not take that, but and then you give tutorials and work with the student so they achieve 90%, we'll say nominally 90% or better. And I think that's an important goal, to move from what is an assembly line, and the line moves at that speed, into one where it's learning outcomes. So didn't mean to wrest away the question, but I'll stop there, and now I feel better having said that.
Melissa, anything you would say on that?
Yeah, there is. I have two things I want to say. One, I agree with you, Ray. And actually, I would say that the growth of online put that conversation into daylight. And I talk frequently and always say, you know, and it reinforced. So in my part of my vision when we were developing online, and as we're doing it here, is that our work elevates the rest of the university. And it does, whether it's a faster response rate when you're applying to be admitted, because we know it's got to be fast in online, or whether it's how faculty are teaching and engaging students. And we know that an adaptive environment like yours, built on learning outcomes, quick assessments, engage through, you learn a lot more than two big papers. And so I just wanted to recognize that. And I wanted to offer one thing when we were talking about featured literacies, because I had made a note of that this morning. One of the pieces there that I think we don't call out when we're developing first-year programs, when we're working with our team members and our faculty, and as we ourselves think about life, is a resilient mindset. So we can talk about curiosity, you know, and I clearly fall on the sword for that one. But I think in terms of helping embed through the work we do, whether we're talking to 40 or 50-year-old adult learners, or whether we're working with 18-year-olds coming in, how we think about building resilience, like a mindset around resilience. Because in that, when you are able to exercise that mindset and feel it, then you're more prepared for change. You realize, if my job goes away, it isn't necessarily me. It's I didn't fail. If something happened, I know resilience is at the nub of it. So what will I do next? What did I learn? What might I have seen in the environment, or I couldn't have seen it? So I wanted to, since Calvin, you brought out futures literacy, that's also a piece of that. I wanted to bring out, I think, the untold story of the potential impact of a more explicit way that we think about resilience in mindset. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. Take a sip.
That's great.
Sorry.
Tom, you want to chime in on something to keep in mind as we have possible futures in mind?
Well, I mean, I'll just sort of go back to what you and I think, have created as a bit of a theme throughout the 10 years of this podcast, which is that and I think it echoes what Ray said. Keeping students as the North Star, right? Like as long as we're trying to keep students' best interests in mind, all of the strategies and technologies and new practices and everything, I mean, they should all be oriented in that direction.
Yeah, and I mean, to these pillar panels, right? I mean, if you're surfacing data that tell the story, if we keep going back, if we keep looking curiously, right? If we keep finding out and responding with okay, what's best for today's students?
Exactly.
What's best for where students are good? We've talked about skating where the puck's going to be, those kind of things. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't know that I have anything substantive to contribute beyond that. So, Tom, maybe over to you for our wrap-up question.
Yeah, so kind of as we look at the approaching horizon of this podcast, we kind of zoom out again to kind of think about these three pillar topics: leadership vision, faculty development, and research and evidence-based practice. Is there a domain that we're not talking about, that's not being addressed, that either we or the community should be talking about? And then I'm going to also ask you all to think about some resources that our listeners could go to that would be helpful. But let's start first with, like, what are we missing here in this conversation? And maybe we'll go to Ray first.
Sure. I think, I've mentioned artificial intelligence. I think that's really important. It's here. It has arrived. So when I look a little bit beyond, I think really quantum computing is going to explode our field. It's going to make us give us the ability to deliver so much more in relative ease. And I think it's important for us to follow the developments. There's maybe it's too early to say, but a Quanta magazine that's worth following. That's one simple piece in that area. But not to be too technology centric, but I think we've got it, the interpersonal down, and we know what we need to do. We need to just work on it every day. But I think the technology is changing, and we need to be on top of that.
Yeah, maybe AI is part of a broader category of just technological development that's impacting us. And that, of course, is the center of the bullseye right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Melissa, any thoughts?
100% agree with Ray, and I think the piece that would be captivating about that is that you would have a podcast that would last forever, because this is not finite. This is something that will be transformative and continue. So I'm with you, and actually, Ray, we're doing a lot at UTSA, at least in the teaching and learning area. We jumped in early. We've got lots of use cases, lots of faculty engaged, from head of math to writing to physics to cyber, and really have a really awesome kind of environment for experimentation and creativity. So I agree there. I think when I have conversations with people about higher ed right now, where we are, where we're going to go, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I feel like we talk a lot just to ourselves. Like, we have our own language. We talk about, what has meaning, what, assuming either other people will know or they won't, but if they don't, well, they should learn. And so I think probably an overlay to what we've talked about, and I would add in technology for sure, AI led, and TBD for more as things evolve, is how we communicate. We're in a profession that uses a lot of jargon that I think sometimes diminishes what we're actually doing, or it makes it harder for the public to know what we're talking about, or learners who might be interested in coming. Quick example, I just co-chaired an OER task force on campus. Okay, it's great. We want to do more OER. Texas is a state that's really ahead of the game in terms of what they require. But you know what? OER doesn't resonate with anyone excepting a few people on campus. And so my biggest pitch has been, can we just call this something that people will know what we're talking about if we want them to do it? So I would say, I mean, again, that's transcendent, but how we think about storytelling, StratCom, all of those things are important to kind of turn some of the corners in what we're all trying to do, whether it's recruiting a broader class, whether it's always keeping students at the center of what we do, or whether it's making sure that our faculty feel valued in the work that they're doing, or the research that we're finding, or the quick bits of assessment. You know, let's think about, I think in a transcendent way, we should think about our language and how we're talking, not assume everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's so
It
funny.
diminishes our work. So yeah.
I've made the same argument, and we've talked about it on the podcast, about badges as a term.
Oh, yeah.
People tend to really dismiss that. And I do think it's evolving. You know, we got micro-credentials and other kinds of terms that are coming up now. But even that, nobody knows what that means uniformly across the space. Yeah. So, Kelvin, did you have any thoughts on anything that we're missing?
Yeah, I mean, maybe what I'll do with my moment on that is to maybe just glom on to both of the things that Ray and Melissa said. One, on what Melissa said, I think a lot about storytelling in the human element. I think that's more important than ever. I mean, I think you pay attention to like how fMRI scans light up when you have story and a human connection more than like, here's your brain on lecture, and it's like, okay, anybody, is this thing on? Is this person alive? And I was really inspired some years ago, Tom, at UCF, when marine biologist turned filmmaker Randy Olson came on campus, and he has like a book, Don't Be Such a Scientist. He talks about the tendency to go and, as opposed to and, but, therefore, is just a simple organizational device, right? And we could all stand to communicate better through graspable human storytelling. And then to what Ray said, I mean, I think the technology piece, I was thinking about technology at hand, you know, integrated. Tom, your team there, you've got developers, you've got the learning management system, you're living, you're creating the technology, you're not just buying it, right? And there's something to be said for figuring out where does that fit, you know? Anyway, that's what I would say. What would you say, Tom?
Yeah, I think what's occurring to me, and maybe because I've got colo on the brain because of recent activities, but I think it's an ongoing maturation of the leadership role of online learning at an institution. So even today, there's no uniformity in title or in actual job descriptions. If you ask somebody, what does the CIO do? It's going to be the same pretty much at every campus. What does the chief academic officer do? What does the registrar do? These are all things that are pretty well-defined spaces. But if you ask somebody, what does a chief online learning officer do at your institution, more than half the time they're going to say, who's that? Like, that's not a title here, right? So who's the dean of this, or the vice provost of that, or the assistant VP of something? And their portfolios are all different, right? Does it include continuing ed? Does it include the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning? Does it have the, marketing? Does it have registration? Like, whatever. They're all different in many ways. So I think that is still coming along. And in some ways, the actual work has outpaced the institutional structures and titles and things that haven't kept pace to keep up with that. And I'm not sure it's a huge problem, but as the positions and the titles and the roles become more professionalized and accepted as, all right, this is something we have to have, I think we'll see that that grow, and maybe it's the next generation of leaders coming up that are going to have to really, I think, put a fine point on it. Ray, you had touched on maybe a resource, and so maybe if each of you can give one or two resources that would be useful for people in the space who are, coming along and trying to become maybe chief online learning officers or work in this area, what would you recommend? And I've seen your bibliographies, so let's limit it to a couple.
Well, Tom, let me comment. Yeah, there are tons of resources out there. I would say maybe in two pieces. There's and this isn't a misleading title. It's the Professional Continuing Online Learning blog for UPCEA. But what it is really a curated reading list. So I get up every morning at 5 and, stay up into the evening trying to glean articles that I think are of use, of interest to those of us in higher education. And looking at online learning and looking at continuing or professional, now I think we're more saying professional education. And so I toss up 3 of those 7 days a week, 365. So they're up there, and we can probably, as Kelvin said, maybe we'll be able to put a URL out there. But so I think that's useful, and you can get it in your email box, and you can just delete it. Oh, there's an article, and then send that to the provost. Don't mention the blog, just say, look what I found, and off you go. The other piece is, and I don't want to have too great a pride, but what I try to do with a biweekly column and Inside Higher Ed is to hit new topics in online, but also AI, also potentially quantum, occasionally, trying to stimulate our minds to think forward. And in those columns, it's called Online Trending Now, 150 of them up there. And I put a lot of citations, just like an academic paper, so that you could look at it, and if it's something you want to dig into, you've got a list of places to go.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. I'm a longtime subscriber of your couple articles a day. They're great. So, Melissa, how about you?
Gonna go in a different direction. But Ray, the comments about UPCEA and what is there was on my list, and I second that. It's a great place to not have to spend hours, but to be able to get some really good information on a regular basis. But I would also say, because I think it's important for online leaders to always be thinking about a broader environment, I have my team always reading the APLU News Digest daily. It's really important. Environment is everything. I always tell people every idea has a time, and people come in with a great thought, but if you read that, it will give you an idea of what's happening in higher ed more broadly. Occasionally, hybrid or online learning, more broadly, the multiplicity of issues that higher ed is dealing with. And I think that that's really, really important for any online leader, particularly to be credible in a broader institutional perspective. So I would say that. And then my last one is to just stay healthy, motivated, and of course, the Chief Online Learning Officer's Guidebook. No substitute for that.
Yeah.
If you want a quick one, I'll go back to a book that a friend gave me in 2017 when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grow up. It's called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Has anybody read it? Probably not. Awesome piece about the independence of ideas, and also creativity. And I think that I think we need all of those things. So I would say APLU site, Daily Digest, UPSEA, and if you can read a book or get it on Audible, check out Big Magic. There's one moment in it that I guarantee you'll go, wow. And
Big Magic.
it will
All
stay
right.
with you. Yeah.
No better way to end this than on a touch of magic, Kelvin.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So do you want to try and land our full passenger plane here?
Yeah, bring it in for a landing
Yeah.
and coast into the jetway. Perhaps by way of summation, we'll say leadership and vision matter to the strategic work of higher educational institutions. Nowhere is this more important than in the strategic work of online and digital education, providing high quality, flexible access to an ever increasingly varied range of potential learners. That's what keeps me coming back every day, right? So how about that?
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, a big, huge thank you to our esteemed initial pillar panel guests, Melissa and Ray. It was awesome to have you on the show.
Thank you. Hey, thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah,
It was great.
absolutely.
Thank you.
So until next time, for Topcast, I'm Tom.
I'm Kelvin.
See ya.